Some of the recent COVID-19 news stories involving food shortages, price increases, and unemployment have highlighted hunger issues. And they've revealed that 1 in 6 adults and 1 in 4 children in the U.S. are considered food insecure.
Yeah, Holland, hunger is a worldwide issue. Threshold for food deprivation or undernourishment, fewer than 1,800 calories a day. And undernutrition goes beyond calories to signify deficiency in energy, protein, essential vitamins, minerals, according to the UN Hunger Report. And so tonight, we're going to be talking about hunger and the specific stories from the pandemic.
Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Boland.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words.
Joining us at the Afterword table is Mike Darrow. He is the Executive Director for Feeding the Carolinas. Welcome, Mike. We're so glad that you're here. Please share a little bit about yourself and what you're working on right now.
Sure, yeah. I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for inviting me to come on. Yeah, I'm the Executive Director of Feeding the Carolinas. We're the statewide association of the Feeding America food banks in North and South Carolina. There are 10 of those. We're part of the big Feeding America network, independent, but part of the overall team across the country. And at Feeding the Carolinas, we do advocacy, brand awareness, helping the resources for our food banks, and serving in times of disasters, normally natural disasters like hurricanes, but now during pandemics, and help kind of navigate resources and get the word out.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing. We look forward to your expertise in our conversation tonight.
We also have at the table with us Alan Harkey, the Regional Director of Feed the Children, helping us understand the stories and learn the ways to engage in the subject of hunger. So Alan, I know you, but the other folks who are with us may not. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Thank you. Thank you, Holland. Great to be here. Thank you, Amy, too, for allowing me to be on your program. I've always been drawn to people who tend to be overlooked, undervalued, and consequently underserved. And for that reason, I've invested the past 27 years of my life working on behalf of those who are blind, disabled, hungry, struggling with poverty. And a few moments before the program started, we were talking about children and grandkids. And believe it or not, Holland, my wife and I now have 6 grandchildren ranging from 3 months old to 14. And I got to tell you that I can't imagine seeing any one of them go hungry or without the medical care they need. And I'm sure that goes for every person in your audience tonight. I mean, after all, we're Americans and we are greatly blessed. And I just don't think that should be happening under our watch. At Feed the Children, our number one goal, our vision, if you will, is that no child should go to bed hungry. And here we are in the 21st century, so proud of our technological prowess and all that we've accomplished, and yet this is happening. And I suspect, Mike, it keeps you up at night as well. But I am so glad to be with an organization like Feed the Children. Been around since 1979. We operate a fleet of semi-trucks that are constantly crisscrossing this country, taking tons of food and essentials to our partners, everything from churches to soup kitchens to pantries, and working together to reach the people that need it most, especially right now with this COVID pandemic.
Wow. You two are both very busy, and I can already hear the passion. This conversation is going to be electric, I can tell. So first of all, Mike, I'm going to start with you. How did you get into the ministry of feeding people?
Yeah, well, I started off the kind of the first half, I guess, of my professional career was in the for-profit world, primarily marketing, some operations. But through a series of downsizings and layoffs, and I found myself in the nonprofit world. My wife is a pharmacist. She was working at a free health clinic, and they needed a part-time fundraiser. And she said, well, he's sitting on the couch at home. Let's get him busy. And so there I went and just fell in love with serving people every day, knowing every day we were doing something to help make them better. So from that, I became the executive director of the North Carolina Association of Free Health Clinics, serving 84 free health clinics across the state. Did a startup national nonprofit called the American Health Initiative, which premise was to recruit retired healthcare professionals to come back and practice medicine the way they thought it would be in a free clinic with no time constraints, be able to treat the whole person, actually get to know them and all. Unfortunately, that was in 2008 when the Great Recession hit, and I ended up going into higher education for a while and did some fundraising there for a private university. Did really well, but I missed that daily contact. And God was really, I'm a person of faith, and God was really leading me to get back to serving and get my hands dirty and get back out there. So then Feeding the Carolinas came along. And so, again, it was just so attractive to me to know that every day we're literally feeding the Carolinas. And so I started 2 years ago. I actually, Hurricane Florence and I showed up the same day. And so we dove right into a disaster relief and all. I loved it. And so that's how I got into this. Definitely a ministry. And I believe that, work is a form of worship and a form of ministry. And it's so easy to see that whether you're Feed the Children or Feeding the Carolinas. Our title of our organization says it all and says what our ministry is. And every day we literally feed the Carolinas.
Wow. Blew in with the hurricane. I love it.
Yeah, that was exciting.
Alan, how about you?
I got started in all of this, Feed the Children, before that, CBM International Christian Blind Mission and Ministries before those two, for a very personal reason. As a child, I became very, very sick quite suddenly and came very close to dying. My parents were not wealthy individuals by any stretch. And somehow AP and UPI picked up the story, and a massive fundraising drive started to save my life throughout the state of Florida. Still have that scrapbook. It's really quite amazing. But people literally giving pennies, hundreds, thousands of dollars to save my life. And they didn't know me from Adam, but they deemed my life was a life worth saving. And so through the combination of donors, working with doctors and lots of other individuals together, I'm here to talk to you tonight. And to be honest, I know that God doesn't expect us to pay us back for grace and for mercy, but I do expect that He expects a good ROL, or a good return on life. And when I found out the children had already been overseas in some of the countries where poverty is just gripping, and all of that broke my heart. But then I learned about children. Right now, to me, this is incomprehensible. Over 1 million homeless children in America today, and people that you stand next to in line at Walmart could be going home to nothing, and we wouldn't even know that they don't have a means to feed their kids. I've just always had a heart for kids and families that are slipping past the attention of most of our public. And I don't know, until the Lord takes me home, I just got to know that I've done the best for that.
Wow, thank you so much. I appreciate that little acronym, ROL, Return on Life. Really amazing stories from both of you. Thank you.
Alan, do you have a story from Feed the Children that you would want the world to hear?
Yeah, I do, Colin. And this is, I guess, maybe something that you and I share together. But, a number of years ago, Colin, when you and I were at CBMI, the Lord gave us all something of a mandate, something that I think he wanted us to achieve. It was called Vision 2020, and it's still going strong, I'd like to report today. But the idea was that we would like to see within our lifetime the elimination of avoidable blindness throughout the developing world. I think it was Emerson that once said, the health of the eye seems to demand a horizon. We're never tired so long as we can see far enough. And Holland, as you'll recall, that only started with just a handful of individuals. And then we watched as the Lord blessed it, and it quickly expanded all over the world. Ministries of health, the World Health Organization, thousands of churches, and what it has accomplished is amazing. More than likely protecting the eyesight of over 100 million people in the final analysis. And so the story I want to tell to this audience tonight is that humanity is stuck with some staggering problems, whether it's vision or children dying from malnutrition around the world. And we think sometimes that those problems are too big. We face problems in our own lives, our own families, and sometimes they dwarf the solutions. We feel overwhelmed. They're too big. But what I want to say tonight is, what if we could dream big enough? What if we could say, no child should go to bed hungry, whether in South Carolina, North Carolina, or Uganda? It isn't permissible under our watch. And I think we just need to dream bigger, and we need to trust God more.
That's great news about Vision 2020. I remember that initiative, and what it was such a small kernel of an idea, but it was one that people could get hold of and understand and say, yeah, if we really work together at all levels, we could make this happen. If we thought about it from the most granular level at the field all the way to how major donors would think about this, and we could really accomplish something. And that we saw that transpire over the course of about 15 years was just extraordinary. And to think that we could do the same things as we think about hunger and as we think about the other issues that have brought this pandemic around, it's amazing. Mike, what would you share?
Well, before the pandemic, when I could get out and travel and we could gather a little bit more, I made the point early on with Feeding the Carolinas to get out and visit not only our food banks, but our community partner agencies. We have a network of close to 4,000 partner agencies across the Carolinas. If you think about your local church pantry, soup kitchen, those kind of things where people are being fed. And so we were up in the mountains of North Carolina, and this church had several different ministries going. One of them was a food pantry. And so, as I was watching the executive director who was taking us through, I noticed that every single person who came through, he would stop, look them in the eye, say their name, and just say hello and how are you doing? And it just really struck me that it's a person-to-person, personal kind of connection there that's going on. It's not just a handout; it's a hand up and helping people. And then a fact that he told me that I thought was true, that has stuck with me, that is, was a fact of his, was the average person coming to his food pantry comes 4 times a year, meaning they're not coming all the time and getting food. They're coming when their car broke down and they had to spend $200 or $300 on their car. And this month they just couldn't buy groceries and medicine. They had to choose. And so they come to a food bank. And so 3 or 4 times a year, we're helping people with that hand up, getting from point A to point B. And that was something that I loved when we did free clinics. That's what we were doing, is trying to help people get from point A to point B. And there's a bigger picture to it. And too often, I think, folks have this picture of social services that people are taking advantage or all these crazy things. It's about the last place where most people want to be. But I'm glad that we can be there for them to help them with that hand up. And that example I saw with that executive director, I've carried with me. I always, whenever I'm out in a food bank or a food pantry, I go straight to the lobby and I sit down and I hear the stories. And it reminds me of why we do what we do.
That is a great story. I ran a church food pantry for about 1.5 years, and it changed the way that I thought, because like you just referenced, I thought about, half the people who are coming here are probably just trying to avoid paying their grocery bill, and discovered that maybe 15% that was true of. But for everybody else, it really was a lifeline, and it was a lifeline they would rather not have to take. It was a perspective shift for me. And I really appreciate you sharing that. It would be great if everybody could volunteer with a food pantry just a little while. You could start to understand a world you may not have a glimpse into.
I think you're right. There's a small percentage, 10 or 15%, that maybe don't necessarily need it, but they're getting the connection. We're building the relationship, and maybe I can have a conversation that is eternally impactful. While I'm there volunteering or working with that food bank, and so there's a reason why God has sent them there, regardless. And so, our approach, before the pandemic and especially now is, if you need food, we're giving you food. Period.
Wow, that is so important. Thank you guys so much. Again, it's so important to hear those stories and the relational connections, and having that person-to-person connection is so important. Thank you. So I'm going to toss this question to you. It has been said that there is enough food to feed the global population, but what are some of the barriers to getting nutritional food to those who need it?
Well, thank you, Amy. There's a habit that we see, at least in the 10 countries or so where we work, and it has to do with education, awareness. I don't care what we call it, but mothers want to provide for their kids and for their families, but they don't necessarily have the nutritional know-how, the knowledge base to do that. And like both of you, Amy, in Holland, you've traveled in some of the places that I've traveled, and quite often the most nutritional food, green leafy vegetables, for example, end up being fed to the livestock, not to the children. And that causes all kinds of problems. And so at Feed the Children, one of the things that we do, we take a community-based approach, and we have a mentoring program where we train a handful of moms on providing nutritional food for their families, and how to cook it, how to prepare it. And then in turn, they actually start home groups where they teach other mothers how to do it. And we sometimes retrofit or build community centers where they can come and get supplemental food and essentials. Most importantly, where they're trained, where they're educated in meal preparation. And then in turn, we encourage them to go and train others. So we're exponentially attacking the problem of hunger. And that word awareness, whether we're on that side of the ocean or on this side of the ocean, it's so incredibly important. So just making people aware, because people all around the world have big hearts. It's just knowing about it, knowing what to do and what not to do.
Fascinating. So one of the barriers then to getting nutritional food is education.
Absolutely. Education and awareness. There's so many more, but that's essential.
Okay. Mike, what about you?
Yeah, Alan, I would agree that awareness and education is a major factor, a major barrier. Just educating people on the need of the issue of food insecurity, locally, regionally, internationally. Some other barriers that we see, kind of more physical barriers, are transportation issues. Kind of that last mile of getting food to people that are in rural areas, or just being able to pay for the cost of transporting. You may have donated produce, but how do you get it there? And then capacity of these community partner agencies, these community pantries, and who may not have, especially now with the volume increases of need for food, do they have enough capacity, refrigerated capacity, to store perishable food? And can they turn it around quickly enough? That's been some of the major challenges more recently for us, is just the volume and handling that warehouse space. Having the refrigerated tractor trailers that are sitting around the parking lots of the food banks to store the excess as it's flushing through. And so, there's financial and logistics kind of barriers there as well that we're working on getting innovative and figuring out ways to work around. I do think, to Alan's point, is just awareness alone is the biggest issue, because you think about, and Alan mentioned this about in line at Walmart, and or you're sitting in the pews at your church, and if there's 1 in 5 facing food insecurity, 1 in 4 kids, you look around and there's people sitting in the pews with you when we can gather that are hungry, that are going to bed hungry, or kids that are going to school with your kids. And we're just not aware. We think, well, gee, not here in America. And so awareness is key.
Yeah, I agree. As an educator, we would send food home every Friday for some of our students because being in school is the one place they're getting a meal. And that awareness and that education, the capacity, and that of those partner agencies, all these things, hopefully through even this conversation is going to help some of the education for those listening. Thank you guys for sharing.
Right. You make a good point, too. I'll just mention backpack programs where we send food home on Fridays from school so that the kids and the family can eat over the weekend. Well, when schools are closed, how does that happen? There's another barrier, having the school system shut down dramatically impacts, the availability and the ability to be able to feed children and their families.
Absolutely.
Hey, Amy, as a teacher, you might be interested in this, and perhaps there are folks out in your audience that are in the education profession. But one of the things that Feed the Children provides are teacher stores. And we are aware that many of you who are teachers are paying for supplies, especially for the students that are really struggling economically at home. But we provide supplies in a store-like format where you as a teacher can come and shop for free. And you can pick up supplies and take them back to your classroom. We also are running summer feeding programs to help counteract the problem that you just described. Many children, that's the only meal they get is at school. And so when school lets out, it's good news for most of them. It's summertime, but for others, it means it's hungry time. And so we have summer feeding programs that are trying to do both. So I invite you to go to our website, check it out. Lots we can do for teachers, and you guys are the real heroes.
Well, I know this teacher is writing furiously, and we will be posting this in our show notes and spreading the word for this resource to our teachers. Thank you guys so much.
So what's a positive story you can share with us, Alan? A story of a community that has experienced hunger and there's been an intervention and things have really turned around for them.
Yeah. Holland, what comes immediately to mind is, we're working in a number of countries overseas, but right now in 4 regional areas in Kenya, we are actually feeding tens of thousands of kids, about 136,000 to be exact, school lunches. We have a school lunch program. And here's the method behind that madness. Number one, it's great to be able to put food in the tummies of some wonderful kids, many, many thousands of them, on a daily basis when school's in session. But as it is with kids here in this country, sometimes getting kids to like going to school is a real challenge. I'm sure some of your listeners will attest to that, although with COVID, it's much different. But the parents here, hey, our little girl, our little boy can get food to eat, nutritious food if they go to school. And so then the students get excited because they're hungry, they can go there and eat. Because as Mike will attest, there is this vicious cycle, right? That when you're hungry, that will eventually lead to poverty, and poverty perpetuates the hunger. It just goes round and around and around. So that's one of the ways that we provide incentives to get kids to go to school in poor countries. And so we're really excited about that one, Hall.
Of any story you would have told or of any intervention you would have suggested, I'm not sure I would have thought of that one. It's so simple, but it's a little bit, maybe it is so simple that it's one of those things we overlook.
It's exciting to see it. It really is. We give God the glory.
Mike, what's happening in the Carolinas that you can share with us?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of innovative ideas and ways to get food to people in need. Kind of on the theme of children in school, as Alan's mentioned, that's where many kids, that's where they can get their meal. And so many of our food banks are running, summer feeding programs now because it's kind of the same thing. And in Elizabeth City, Food Bank of the Albemarle, which is on the northeast corner on the coast of North Carolina, very rural, very spread out. The school buses, the school system out there was running their school bus routes and delivering those meals, the lunch meals, out to kids through the bus routes. And so the food bank there partnered up with them and utilized the buses to send out even more, like boxes of non-perishable canned goods and all, like meals for a family for several days. And through the bus system, they were giving the kids kind of their lunch, but then also this additional food that was getting out there too. And that was something they did pretty early on, pretty innovative in a way to collaborate. So we're seeing all kinds of collaborations like that. And like most issues, this is solved by neighbors and by communities. And so we're seeing communities get real creative. And our food banks are going straight to communities and helping them with mobile distributions and all that. We've had to really, pivot, quite dramatically in how we function. And food banking as we know it will be different coming out of this and be different for the better, I think.
Could you share with us what you mean by it'll be different for the better?
Sure. I think, we're just seeing a lot of new ways. There's always a balance, and I'm not quite sure where this will shake out. But one thing that's important with like a community food pantry or even the food banks is, the dignity and respect and allowing folks to shop. Like, I can go to my grocery store and shop. And so allowing them to shop at a pantry gives them some of that dignity and respect. And so now we can't do that. And so we had this pivot to doing pre-packed boxes of meals where we give this to a family for a week, do a drive-through mobile distribution where we, no contact, put it in the trunk, little or no paperwork, and off they go. And so somewhere between the two of those, I think will be a balance. There's some efficiencies that come with the pre-packed box and that kind of distribution, but we also need to remember that human touch as well. And so I think there'll be some efficiencies that come out of this, but yet going back to some of that human touch, that contact as well. Also, we're seeing, the funders and supporters that are helping us with capacity and all. And so I think we'll be able to do a lot more with perishable, with like produce and protein, which will be great to help. We're helping to build up capacity down at the community level. That'll change how we manage, because if they can handle more product, more pounds, then it changes the whole delivery system and the logistics of all that. And so it's something I don't know what it's going to be yet, but we've had to get really creative. And so it's going to be really fascinating when we come back together, when this is all said and done, and kind of do a review of here's the best practices of what we've been doing and what can we learn from it? What can we learn from it to use during normal or use during a hurricane, back to a natural disaster that we deal with, which is different than a pandemic because it's localized and focused and it goes away a lot quicker. But yeah, there's some similarities.
That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, Holland, you kind of stole my question. I was thinking the exact same thing because we've had some connections to that with our grandparents' issue about going to get food and feeling that agency in that respect, but thinking about it changing for the better. I appreciate that insight, Mike.
Sure. And one thing that we're, our advocacy position is always anything that can help more people get food that need it, we're in favor of. And so we're big advocates of SNAP, what traditionally was called food stamps, and now it's electronic and all that. Increases in SNAP. Where's the most efficient place for you and I to get our groceries, to get our food? It's in a grocery store. And so if we can provide these SNAP benefits, provide this card and increase the benefits where folks can go to a grocery store to get their food, that's the most efficient way. And it's also more dignified, more respectful because they're paying with their card just like you or I. It's just a different kind of card. And so that's something we've worked really hard. We've gotten increases during the pandemic, which have been great. And so we think that's an avenue that we will continue to advocate for.
Thank you so much. So, Alan, we're kind of coming to the end of our first episode with you and Mike. What is an essential element we need to consider regarding hunger and the stories that we hear?
Hunger affects everything. It impacts a person's self-image and worth, for example, their motivation. It's absolutely crippling to families, nations even. And it's so very very basic. I guess during this program, Amy, I've talked a lot about our overseas work, but the fact of the matter is we're partnering with local heroes like Mike all over this country. Our job is to be a supply chain. We are blessed to have some of the largest food producers and corporations like Tyson and others that keep us supplied with food. I mean, it's been more difficult since the pandemic, but local agencies, food kitchens and pantries and churches, they're running short on food. And I just want to stress the fact that we have a fleet of semis going all over the country. I mean, since March, we've distributed, to give you some idea on the metrics, 41 million pounds of food and essentials for COVID-19 relief. That works out, Amy, to about 3,225 shipments to local community partners. And Mike, one of the things that you and I need to get together in Side Huddle is how we can work together right here in the Carolinas to make it maybe a little bit easier for families. My heart breaks when I hear about dads and moms that have had good jobs, but due to the economic impact of COVID, they're now out of work. They're trying to put food on the table, and we're the firewall. So we love our partners. We have partners all over the country, and I think you might make a really good partner for Feed the Children.
Absolutely.
Affects everything. That's a pretty essential element. How about you, Mike?
I could do this short and sweet and say what Alan said, because you're spot on, Alan. It's so impactful in a negative way when you're hungry. When you're a child and you're hungry in the classroom, you can't learn. When you're an adult and you're hungry, it affects your work performance or your stress level or your family dynamics or just fill in the blank. It's a complex issue that touches so many aspects of our lives, and it's all around us. It's not just it's not in a foreign country. It's in our backyards. It's in our neighborhoods. And my ultimate goal, like Alan's, is to be out of a job where we don't have this issue of food insecurity, because it's ridiculous that we have it. Yeah, it's prevalent. It's there, and it can be solved.
Thank you.
And that's a great place to draw the line on this first part of our conversation about hunger and stories of hunger in a pandemic. While you wait for part 2, please go to theafterwordpodcast.com and become a subscriber. It does help us keep the conversations going. Also, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast, and tell your friends about us. And as always, you are welcome at our table.